All right, so last time we did those first two, the extensive objects and objects for purifying behavior. And we're talking objects because the assumption is you already understand about motivation, right? So you already know your reason for meditating. Now you're looking at your options for meditating and ways to emphasize specific parts of your path. So hopefully your motivation is to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings, and then you specialize or zero in on, in order to do that, this. In order to do that, that. And so when you're looking at these two, the extensive objects and the objects for purifying behavior, these are a little bit more, general, and you're going to find them in the higher training in concentration. And that's common to all forms of Buddhism. You're also going to find them in the perfection of concentration section in the Lamrim Chenmo, if we're talking Mahayana. So let's assume we're Mahayana because this is a Mahayana center. Did you have any hangover questions about those first two from last time before we go into anything new? And this was all related to Chapter 6, which hopefully you read or skimmed. Was it clear enough, if you wanted to do them, you could find out where they are and sit down and go ahead? They were intellectually pretty straightforward, yeah? Yeah. So, when we get into these objects for expertise, these are pretty much all meditations on emptiness. They're all different ways of looking at the way something is lacking inherent existence, particularly the self is lacking inherent existence. And so in order to realize that, we have to look at our problematic relationship with what we label self on, right? So we label self on the basis of any number of things, instead of just kind of having a big open umbrella sort of meditation that starts with, who am I? Knowing I'm empty of inherent existence. You're zooming in specifically on one of these lists to really get precision with, I thought I was that, but I'm not. I thought that was inherent, but it isn't. And you're really getting very precise. So the first option is to use the aggregates. And the side benefit of these is that you're going to be developing excellent concentration and excellent wisdom, as well as getting better at your realization of emptiness. So when we say the 5 aggregates, what do we mean? Form, feeling, discrimination,
factors, and consciousness.
Compositional factors, consciousness. Nisim is the fastest talker and wins. But it's quite correct, quite correct. So what you're doing here is you don't have to think of them as a lump. You can think first form. What is form? Body. Okay. The body is empty of inherent existence. I know that intellectually. How about I know that more precisely using the analysis of dependent arising? So just intuitively and based on your own study, what would you do if you were trying to see how the body was empty of inherent existence because it dependently arises? What do you think some of the things you would look at would be?
The organs.
The organs. Yeah.
So many organs in the body.
Yep. You would say, I feel like I am my heart, I am my lungs, I am my circulatory system, I am my eyes, I am whatever sense is the most dominant that day. You let it feel dominant, and then you see the way it's dependent. So yeah, you could use the organs, absolutely, and see how they're all interdependent. Except for, the appendix. It's just hanging out. I don't know why it's there. Right? But when we're looking at form, you can start even more coarse, and you can start with your very problematic surface identity, which isn't even getting to the body yet, but is related to the physical world. Like, where was this body born? And then what do you think that means about who you are? And what if you were born a few miles west or a few miles east? What would that say about you? I think, I was born in the Paradise Valley of Montana. What if I was born 30 miles down the road in Livingston where it's all kind of dusty? Would that change my whole feeling about myself? I was not born in the Paradise Valley. I was born in a dustbin. Okay, somehow changes some feeling of it. What if my mom was visiting Canada and gave birth to me in Canada? Then I'd be Canadian, right? I'd be way nicer, right? A lot less loud, take up less space, right? Who would I be? Just a few miles here or there. So we're looking at the way in which you observe the body is very much dependent on things that did not come from you, but you call them you. It's so easy intellectually and so confronting emotionally. And then you think, okay, what about this body's size, shape, and color? Is it me? Do I like it? Do I hate it? Is it me? Yeah, and you really realize how much the size, shape, and color of your bag of bones, this sack of meat, you attribute selfness to. Even though you know the cells are changing and completely replacing every 7 years, you know that your nails are growing and cutting and growing and cutting. Some people are so obsessed with their nails they feel like an identity feature. It's blue this month, says something about me. It's already dead. Yeah? It's weird. We're weird. Yeah? So you have to see the way that you're weird to kind of like pierce the absurdity of identification. And you haven't even gotten to the organs yet. It'd be awesome if you even got to the organs. And so when you're meditating on the body and looking for the self, often it starts to centralize somewhere here in the heart chakra. And that is not the self, that is a concentration of winds. Yes. And the mind's seat, or the heart's seat, where it kind of hangs out in the most dominant way, is indeed around the heart center. But of course it pervades the whole body. Sometimes what will happen is just by searching, you become tense, and the area of tension feels like the self. A pit of the stomach, a tightness of the lungs, some sort of thing like that. Weird stuff happens, and what you're wanting to do is keep a really flexible, really curious mind. You already know the conclusion you're coming to, but don't rush to it. Let it prove itself to you experientially. So you do that with the body, and even if you're doing that preliminary step of very surface things that aren't even meditation on the body, it's incredibly powerful for equanimity. It's so powerful for breaking down boundaries and barriers and all of the ways that make us feel paranoid and suspicious of other people. Yeah? We could, think of something like, let's divide the room psychologically between people with straight hair and people with curly hair. Suddenly you feel division. People with blue eyes, people with brown eyes. Suddenly there's division. And you haven't even thought about it until you think about it. Now there's division. Does it say something about you that you have curly or straight hair? No. And you could add curls or straighten them anyway. And yet there is even a little bit of identification with something as surface as hair, which is already dead, right? It's weird, okay? We have to see how weird we are. And so when you're doing meditations on emptiness, do it with that playful mind, because if you don't, the sense of self will run away and say, I never said I was inherent. And it'll hide. Yeah, if you go all in like an interrogator, like a policeman, and say, prove yourself, show you exist, it'll just kind of go, poof, I never said. Yeah, but if you're like teasing it and playing with it, little components of concreteness dissolve. And this is before you've realized anything, you are more relaxed. You are less paranoid. You're less suspicious. You're more at ease with your fellow man. Already just that, and you haven't even gotten to the more subtler versions. So do it in this playful way. And when you're looking at any of these, go back a few steps and ask yourself, did I give myself the best conditions to be able to concentrate at all? Am I happy enough in my life? Do I know how to access contentment? Because if your mind is full of discontent and full of guilt and full of worry and anxiety, and then you're expecting yourself to focus on anything, it's not going to happen. So it's like, give yourself the best chance to be able to even sit still by making your life a little less busy, or at least your mind a little less busy. And we often say that we're too busy for this, too busy for that, but then we find time to give a lot of concentration to things that don't nourish us. So we don't want to frame various forms of entertainment as bad, because that will trigger rebellion, which will make us want to do them more. We have to frame them as, this is not the nourishment I call it. This is not the relaxation that I think it is. It's a temporary fix. And it absolutely works temporarily, so I'm not going to even pretend that it doesn't work temporarily. Listening to something, watching something, reading something, something that is entertaining is absolutely settling you down for a second and giving you a moment's peace. To the degree that you can experience peace so far. Don't pretend that isn't the case, because you will trigger rebellion and say, to hell with it, I'm Netflix binging the rest of the day. Yeah, or I'm listening to music the whole day. You're not the boss of me, Buddha. And the Buddha was like, I never said. It's your life, man. Do what you want. Yeah. So what you want to do is to see that these things that we go to for temporary relief and the things that we give a lot of concentration to are short-term and lead to habits that mean that this short-term thing takes over our whole life, and our life just races by with a flood of coping mechanisms. And there's very few snapshots in our life where there's been concentrated effort to progress and deepen in a way that's accessing our fullest potential. So it's in your own best interest to shift your priority from short-term to long-term. But it's very difficult because these things do work temporarily. So don't tell yourself you're not allowed. Okay, you're a grown-up, you can do whatever you want. Tell yourself, I am allowed, I can do whatever I want. What I could do is perfect the mind and be consistently happy and kind. I could do that. That would be amazing. That would be empowering. So you just kind of sit with, what is a way to gently expand my vision when I'm thinking in my everyday life, when I'm doing my normal job with my normal relationships and my normal whatever activities? What's a way to broaden the focus a little bit and broaden the goal a little bit so that things are contained and framed in a different way? And then my choices are different about what is nourishing. So it might be that you have no mental space to meditate, but instead of going to your old kind of entertainment fixation, you say, well, then I won't meditate. I'll just sit still for a minute and drink some water. Yeah? It's like we feel like we have to be doing, all the time doing. If you sit long enough, you might actually get bored. Yeah? And if you're bored, you might have some mental space to actually sit down and meditate. But if you're constantly stimulated, there's not a lot of chance for you to settle and deepen. So it's like, give yourself a chance to be bored enough to explore a creative way of developing your potential. Do you know what I mean? Right? Like, it's harder to be bored than it used to be. We have more options to fill in the space, and things that are totally worthwhile and productive in a general sense, but then we just give our whole life to them. You know, and there's also these social obligations and contracts we feel with our relationships with other people, and we could put some sort of boundaries where it's just a little less frequent and we have a little more space. And it's done in such a way that you're not offending or upsetting anyone, but you're getting back a little bit more time. Because it's actually going to benefit those same people more. You know, there might be an expectation that you go home for dinner once a week or something like that. And you might. But do you need to stay until 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock? Or could you just see everyone, hug everyone, have the main meal and go? And actually not be exhausted at the end of it and have a little bit of spaciousness at the end of your day. Is there a way of getting out of one a week or one a month or one a year, right? I know that family is a very nourishing thing, but it also can be a very distracting thing. So ways of just navigating boundaries that aren't barriers, that are giving yourself a chance to go more deeply. Things like watching the news seems essential for a committed citizen of the world who has social awareness. Indeed, we should watch the news occasionally. Do we have to watch it 3 times a day? Do we have to watch it once a day? Do we need to wake up and immediately look at our phone and freak ourselves out? Is that helping the world get better? You don't need to. And I'm sure if there's something happening in your neighborhood, your neighbors will tell you. So it's just one of these things of, can we turn down the urgency of worldly things and turn up the urgency of the path to enlightenment? Because we're in a unique position to have actually found a path that works. There are many paths that work. We aren't the only one, but we found one that works. So if we were to just say, well, that's lovely, but anyway, Netflix, it's a bit poignant. Doesn't make us bad. It means a lost opportunity. It's very human. But, is there just gentle ways of expanding that focus? And one of the quickest ways is to remember what you might think on your deathbed. What will you be rejoicing in? What will you be regretting? Will you regret hanging on to grudges? Will you regret being critical and judgmental and looking down on others? Will you regret your pride? Will you regret all of the time wasted in angst, in anxiety, and just getting lost in entertainment? Probably. Yeah. There was a beautiful nun at Chenrezig Institute who died, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago now, I guess, Venerable Annie Margaret. She was amazing. She'd been a nun for like 40 years. And on her deathbed, we were saying, Venerable, what do you want to tell us before you die? What should we take away from this relationship we have with you? And she said, don't waste time. And this was someone who'd been a nun for 40 years. And she was feeling like her big regret was wasting time. She was an amazing person. I never saw her angry once in the 10, 15 years I knew her. Not angry once. Amazing. And that was her takeaway, don't waste time. So there's got to be a way in which we have a joyful aspiration that doesn't feel like a heavy judgment. A joyful aspiration that allows us to do some of the silly nonsense that we know is time wasting, but to do it in a different way, in a shorter way, with less prioritization. Yeah, it's just kind of like that's something that's there when I've just lost myself to attachment for a moment, not that's something that I plan for my whole day because finally I get to relax. It's a different way of being. Sometimes we feel so much anticipation for things like holidays, and we have all of this buildup and concentration and energy and money and time, and then you go on the holiday and it's pretty-ish, but there are pretty things here. It's entertaining-ish, but there are entertaining things here. You see people, but there's people here. Yay, now you can tell people you've been to Paris, but it turns out Paris is just a city. Tel Aviv is also a city. Like, cool stuff everywhere. What was it all for? Then you get home and you're tired and you have to recover from your holiday. And you might feel full of attachment waves and everyone look at my photos and no one cares but they're being polite. And now you will have been a person that's been to Paris, that, you have that now. Saw some buildings, saw some people with funny accents, saw some different landscape. All for what? Did it help you become a deeper person? If it did, go to Paris, but you probably could go be a deeper person staying at home, going more deeply. So it's not like you can't travel, but is your travel carrying with it development on your path? Or can you bring development on your path to it? If you've decided, I'm doing this, I'm having fun, I've had a hard life, I'm doing my holidays now. Okay, is there a way to weave in something about development on the spiritual path to it? Yeah, is there a way to elevate it in some way? I was thinking about my grandparents on one side of my family who had enough financial stability that they could retire at like 60, and then they lived to be 90, and they were just retired for decades, right? And I was bewildered because they were perfectly healthy, robust, played tennis, played golf, and they were lovely people. They were Catholic, and they would go to Mass, sometimes a couple times a week. But really, their whole life was planning for entertainment and recovering from entertainment, right? Planning and recovering, moments of entertainment in between, and then they die, and there's a montage of photos of their life, going to pretty places, sometimes looking happy, sometimes the happiness looking forced, right? What was it all for? And I still think they led very meaningful lives. It's not to say that, it's just, could there have been more depth if the priorities had shifted? And we will never be any younger than we are right now. We may not be any healthier than we are right now. Possibly we could get healthier, maybe not, but definitely not younger. This is the time, right? So when you're thinking about your meditation practice, you want to really ask yourself, if I'm having trouble concentrating, do I need to go back a few steps and think about ways to be content? Because a lot of this distraction is chasing external stimuli that gives us momentary contentness. And so be kind to yourself, empower yourself, and realize that you can be content with less busyness, less stuff, less interaction. And it's satisfying when you buy something fun and pretty and entertaining, but it's also deeply satisfying to feel like you don't have to. Do you know that feeling of satisfaction of when you've chosen not to buy something and then realized you were happy anyway? It's actually really deeply empowering and also saves money. Okay? So it's just kind of like taking the power back from objects, taking the power back from societal expectations, and giving yourself a chance to be a little more still. And people will understand or they won't, whatever. They understand or they don't now anyway. What's going to actually benefit you and those around you is how much you organize your mind. Organize your mind, stabilize your mind, concentrate the mind. So concentration, will help you in absolutely anything you want to do. Concentration will add power to everything you value and can lead to enlightenment because all of the realizations you need are held by the foundation of concentration. So without concentration, even if you're an intelligent and brilliant philosopher, you cannot penetrate the essence of these philosophical points because your mind has no stability to do so. Does that make sense? So concentration is immediately helpful. You'll be better at whatever you like doing, but also this incredible broad benefit of holding all of the other things you want to work on. So when we're looking at all of these, just make sure that you've given yourself a chance to be able to do them. Yeah. So of course you need to study them, but don't forget the preliminaries of just, do I know how to be content? Can I sit still with myself? Because those are practices too. And they're not necessarily less than. They're fundamental to all of the rest of it. So when you're developing objects for expertise, or you're identifying and using objects for expertise, you can also go down into things like the constituents, which is the elements like water. So you're going deeper than like the organs. You're going into the elemental nature, like water and fire and air and earth and things like that, which are then subdivided, right? And it doesn't even matter if you know the whole list. You could just sit with bones. Sometimes feel like self. Are they? Right? Just the earth element in the sense of the bones. Just that. Could be really interesting. The sources, I think, are a really interesting place to investigate. The sources are the sense consciousnesses, their objects, and their sense power. So you have eye primary consciousness, nose primary consciousness, right? All the five senses. and then the sixth one being mental consciousness. And then they each have an object, and they each have very subtle form that occupies the organ that is like the bridge between outside and inside. And this is a really interesting place to look at dependent arising, because you start to see the way in which your whole experience is not coming just from you. It's coming, yes, from the past, but also I'm looking at these flowers, and then with my eye organ, and then my eye primary consciousness, and my eye sense power and form, and my experience is now not entirely my own. I didn't just make it up by myself. Those flowers were a condition. If they'd been a different color or a different kind, something different would be happening. So they didn't give me the experience, but they're a component of my experience. Just like this person or that person is a component of my experience. But my mind meeting it and the way my mind has been conditioned when it meets it is also a factor. So you could use any of them or all of them. And then the links, that's the 12 links of dependent arising that a lot of you have studied. It's using the 12 links in a little bit of a different way. Normally when we study or meditate on the 12 links, we're going through them and seeing how they relate to each other for any number of different reasons. One, to look at places where we can break the cycle. Yeah, we're looking for places where we can break up the 12 links. We're looking for antidotes to the various 12 links. Here, we're looking at the 3 marks of existence. So the 3 marks of existence is that all compounded phenomena are impermanent. All contaminated phenomena are in the nature of suffering. And all phenomena altogether are empty and selfless. Yes, and so you're looking at them from a different view or a different filter. So you know them well enough to just go, okay, so let's just start with the first one, ignorance. Ignorance is suffering. Very true. Ignorance is impermanent. Good news. Ignorance is empty. Oh, very good news. Yes? But you're looking at one and seeing how those 3 marks of existence are true for each, particularly empty and selfless. So that's one way. And then appropriate and inappropriate results. This is basically looking at karma. And when you're looking at those ones, it's basically recognizing that positive actions lead to happiness, negative actions lead to suffering, and looking at the dependent arising of all of that. And of course, karma is extremely hidden, so it's hard for us to penetrate, but we can get a general idea by looking at dependent arising in general. So with all of these sets, what you're really asking yourself is, if I'm going to pick one, what's the best one for me given my level of study and my interest that's going to facilitate realizing emptiness? Yeah, which one of those sets? So it's not like you have to do them all. It's really asking yourself which kind of chunk of things, looking at them, would help me understand that the self lacks inherent existence. And even just a subdivision of a subdivision. So these are like options, they're not mandates. Do you understand? Right? So you just pick one. And then there's objects for purifying afflictions is the 4th of objects of meditation. And these are coarse and subtle. And it's slightly more subtle than the ones for purifying behavior that were obviously a lot more coarse. So with all of these, what you're really asking yourself is, all right, so today on my cushion, do I want to work in such a way that I have a linear progression of things I do in my daily practice that I'm just gradually working through? Or for me, is it better to work on the same thing again and again and again and again? For me, what's going to work? And learning that, you have to ask yourself, what is my goal? So your goal is enlightenment, but what's your immediate goal that's facilitating your enlightenment? What is the main obstacle that you're struggling with? What's the big stressor in your life? And it's a condition, but by acknowledging that condition, you can kind of drill down into what is the affliction that is making it stressful. Yeah, precisely. Is it more of an attachment stress, an anger stress, or an ignorance stress? Variations on the theme. And based on that, then you can pick. So I think that all of you probably know by now that the hardest thing with meditation is having a routine to meditate. Once you're used to meditating, you can kind of plug in whatever works into your routine. But it's something that is very personal, and until you have, I guess, a guru-disciple relationship, your guru is the Lam Rim. Yeah, and so you have to decide for yourself, what is my schedule? What's reasonable? What's manageable? What will I actually do? And the routine is almost more important than what you plug into the routine in the beginning. So the routine could just start very simply with the breath for 5 minutes in the morning, and then your motivation, and then that's it. But if you're doing it every morning, that routine is going to carry you really well. If you've done 1 or 2 excellent meditations for several hours in various contexts and then die tomorrow, will it have the momentum and the repetition and the familiarity to kick in at the time of death and to give you refuge? It's the continuity that's going to build the depth, not peak moments of cool stuff. It's the continuity. So the continuity is so much dependent on a positive relationship with your own mind, friendliness towards your own mind, lack of expectations and pressure. So you're just saying, I'm going to show up for myself. Some days I'm going to have a lot of focus and clarity. Some days I'm going to be vague and grumpy. Some days I'm going to forget, and none of that means I'm bad or worthless or can't become enlightened. Just keep showing up. Keep showing up. And when you've lost the thread and you've left your cushion for weeks or months and it's gotten all dusty and your altar's gotten cluttered and you're feeling all sorts of guilt and you don't even want to look at it and you have cushion aversion because you've pushed too hard too fast at one point and now you don't want to do it at all, just be nice to yourself and say, oh, my pacing was off. Start again. Don't make it a big thing. Just say, whoops, my pacing was off. Start again. This time gentler, this time with more humility. Because we understand a huge amount more than we can actually do. And that is natural. Yeah, we understand tons of things that we don't do and can't do yet. So you think, all right, today, breath. Yes, why breath? Concentration. Why concentration? It's going to help. Simple. Yeah. And then when there's enough mental space, you can invite in the next level of depth. You're inviting it back in. Okay, so we'll do a little meditation now. And we'll do just a very gentle one. And when we're doing a meditation like this, hear it half as I'm doing a meditation and half as I'm getting instructions to do a meditation that I can then try at home. Okay. And so start by settling into your body. And scan the body without worrying about the body. Some parts will be comfortable, some parts will be uncomfortable. Just know that. And where it's obvious that you're holding tension, gently dissolve that tension. And areas where the tension is just stuck, gently know that and don't worry. So let your mental awareness of the body help you make friends with your own body again. This vehicle for awakening, the perfect human rebirth. And then consciously align the body as straight as it can be without forcing it. The back strong and stable and engaged. The front open and relaxed, with no tightening or tensing of any of the muscles. Very soft, open front. And shift your focus to the breath. Thoughts will arise, neither agree nor disagree with them. And revive your motivation of bodhicitta to yourself in your own words. Wake it up. And then come back to the breath. But now as you watch the breath, search for who is breathing. You know that the lungs are breathing, but who or what is telling them to do so? Who is experiencing breath? What is this self that seems to be breathing? Just explore the question. Watch the breath and wonder about the self. And allow it to seem like the breath is experienced by the whole body, and then the whole body seems to be the self. But who is it that's aware of that whole body? Does the self appear at the center of the body or above the body? Just investigate. And focus less on needing to find or conclude. Put more focus on the focus itself that searches. And so maybe it feels like the self is less the body and more the feelings within the body sensations of pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. So shift to observing feeling within the body and search for the self there. And maybe physical feeling just seems like one component of experience, but not the self. Maybe mental feeling is more the self. So shift your focus into your mood. Is your mental experience pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? And when you find it, check it for the self. Mental feeling. And it becomes clear that there is mental feeling, but that there is also something describing mental feeling that is able to discern physical from mental, that is able to discern feeling from other experiences. And so maybe the self is the mental factor of discernment or recognition. Is this discrimination me that can distinguish this from that? See if you can find that aspect and then search for the self there. And see if you can experientially conclude that the self is not the form aggregate, is not the feeling aggregate, is not the discrimination aggregate. And maybe it's the compositional factors, maybe it's primary consciousness, but probably not. Checking into those later. See if it feels true that the self is only that which is labeled on the collection. And dedicate the merit of this contemplation to the development of your fullest potential for the benefit of all sentient beings. And you can relax your attention. Okay, so more on this is all in Chapter 6, so if you haven't read Chapter 6, please do so. It's a really excellent chapter. We'll have a little short break, and then we'll come back and do a few more meditations, and if you have questions and stuff, we can do it then.